And you thought SYNTAKT wouldn't get any more updates, but here we are. SYNTAKT 1.40, let's check it out. So of course the most awaited feature is the sample player machine called TwinShot. 64 samples can be loaded into the SYNTAKT, each with a maximum length of 5 seconds. And what do you do if you have samples? Of course, you load 909 samples. For each TwinShot track, we can have 2 samples, which is a way to save on tracks, but also for interesting sound design. The 2 samples can be balanced to each other. The upper one has a DJ-style filter and a dedicated envelope, while the other is looping and plays for as long as the track's amp envelope is set. They can also be individually tuned. We can parameter lock balance, for example, like this. And speaking of hi-hats, we also have chokes. I have a closed hi-hat here. And an open hi-hat here. We go to pattern and on the bottom we find track relations. Track 2 will choke track 3. And you'll notice it doesn't work because the closed hi-hat has a too long note length, so we have to shorten it. And now it works. A short note length does not mean you have to cut your samples short, because they still ring out if you have set the amp envelope accordingly. As mentioned, sample 2 is looped, which we can hear if we lengthen the amp envelope. Of course, we can use this for non-drum sounds such as pads and leads. In this case, I have 2 samples from the Hydra synth. This one and this one. I can blend them, tweak the filter envelope, and TwinShot does support portamento. Of course, we can modulate balance for interesting effects. If we go further down the sample list, a minus sign appears, indicating reverse playback of the samples. Not only portamento but also legato works with samples. This option can be found under Setup Legato. Also under Setup, there is now key tracking as a new modulation source. We can use it to let pitch control synth parameters, or even achieve microtonality. -4 corresponds to quarter tones. And -8 effectively disables pitch tracking. In other words, you can use any EDO your heart desires. Inside the track relations menu, we have not only chokes, but also track layering. For example, in this pattern, which was created before the new update, I had the problem that I wanted to layer two sounds, a bass drum and a bass drum transient, but also use probability. I resolved that by using the neighbor condition. But now this workaround is not needed anymore and we can delete all of this. We go to Pattern, Track Relations, set track 8 to trigger track 9, and there we have it. Much easier. By the way, these are the drums of a song of my new EP Crimson Parallax. You'll find the link to Bandcamp in the description below. Track layering also enables us to build a compressor. As an example, I have this techno track. And now we want compression. First, it's important that all our tracks are routed to the FX track. Then we go to Track Relations. Select our kick, press FX, so the kick will trigger the FX track's amp envelope. Now we can shape the amp envelope to behave like compression. With the depth set to max, we can really zone in on the sound we want to achieve. Finally, we set the depth to 0, then dial in, listen, and decide how much compression we need. For classic pumping sidechain effects instead, we start by keeping everything as is, set the amp envelope back to max, and then dial in our new envelope. Finally, we remove the bass drum from the FX track. Apart from closed and open hi-hats, you can follow more creative ideas, especially with probability. Check out this pattern. Four sounds are layered and or choked in different combinations. The kick is layered with a click. In track relations, we can see that track 11 triggers track 3. On track 10, we have this wild noise, and it has no trig conditions. The kick on track 11, however, has probability conditions assigned and chokes track 10. So whenever the kick is triggered, it cuts off the noise. Track 10 in turn chokes the hi-hat on track 12. That means the hi-hat only plays when track 10 is choked by track 11. In other words, the hi-hat will play while the kick is ringing out, but never while the noise is playing. And all together with the snare, sounds like this. Speaking of the FX block, the filter now features panning. I don't know what for, but here it is. A great addition is the possibility to exclude specific tracks from Control R, which lets us create smooth transitions without ruining half of the mix. A major highlight for me are the new not A-B trig conditions. For example, it allows a trig to play every time except the fourth time, leaving all kinds of workarounds in the past. There are plenty of quality of life improvements as well, related to handling of sequencer pages, overdubbing, prepare mutes, personalization options. Several parts of the UI have the modern look of the new diggies, and mute mode is now remembered between power cycles, just to name a few. I was never particularly excited about the idea of getting samples on the SYNTAKT, but since I've been completely consumed by the synthesis possibilities of the Digitone 2, sample playback actually makes the SYNTAKT interesting again. And sequencer features such as not A/B, choking and layering open new creative ways. Before I leave you with the final gem of this video, if you need sounds, samples or lessons, you'll find everything at dissonantwitchcraft.com, including the SYNTAKT Curses sound pack. On this channel, you'll find tons of SYNTAKT tracks and other hardware experiments. And if you like this video, please subscribe and hit the stupid bell. Back to the music. With Firmware 1.40 we can load up silly vocal samples and do Amiga style hardcore all day long. Bye bye!
That's it, an Elektron army. That's it, an Elektron army. That's it, an Elektron army. That's it, an Elektron army.